Hello. Hi, everyone online. We're discussing the Taratanka that is coming off of the wall.
Okay, we'll begin with the 7-limb prayer, which is on page 35 in the Gold Prayer Book. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of psychic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Sajipaki Chukshing Meto Tramri Rablingji Nidegen Padi Sangye Jingdu Mikte Uwa Idro Kunam Dag Jingla Chuparshok. My apologies to everyone in the Gampa. This is on pages 97 and 98. Still getting used to this. Jetsun Lama Dampa Kenam Kicha Kukala Kense Chudzin Trik Jitar Tsampe Dulce Zinma Lazab Gechuki Jarpawab Tu Sol Idam Guru Ratnamandala Kam Nirya Tayami. And still on page 98, the Refuge in Bodhicitta prayer. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Anybody get a chance to read some of the text? Is that enough? Maybe. Okay. Any questions from what you've read? Yes, Elise.
Might regret asking, but I still have a confusion about something about arhats, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. Okay? Now on page 82, they said an arhat is a person who is free from cyclic existence because he's realized emptiness, correct?
Arhats are actually liberated from samsaric existence, so they've perfected their realization of emptiness.
Okay, so an arhat is someone who has realized emptiness and is free from the cycle, samsaric cycle.
They perfected that wisdom, okay. So they're free of cyclic existence, yes.
Okay, so then a bodhisattva is, I'm confused. It says here, only by engaging in the path of emptiness arrives at Buddhahood, but remains in cyclic existence to take rebirth. I
Okay,
realize
so that's confusing two different topics. The sentence does, okay?
Oh, okay.
So a bodhisattva, what is the measure of a bodhisattva? What marks the beginning of being a bodhisattva?
the desire to improve oneself in order to help others.
Okay, so it's that desire to become enlightened
Right.
in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so it has those two aspirations. And it has to be uncontrived for you to have the status of bodhisattva. So that means you have contemplated and meditated on this state for a long enough time for it to become powerful enough to become a main mind, which influences every moment of mind that you have. That's an uncontrived.
But you don't necessarily have to have realized emptiness like an
I'm
arhat.
not talking about emptiness.
Oh, it's...
This is just to be a
oh,
bodhisattva.
Okay.
This is
so-
the measure of being a bodhisattva.
Okay.
Okay? An Arya being, whether you're a bodhisattva or not, okay? So someone on the Hinayana path, who's done the path of accumulation, done the path of preparation, and now has a realization of emptiness, is an Arya being. An Arya bodhisattva now has both that uncontrived mind of bodhicitta and has the realization of emptiness. Okay?
Okay.
Okay? Neither one of those Aryas are free of cyclic existence yet. Okay? So they have to complete their path, perfect wisdom, okay? And then, for bodhisattvas, it's on the eighth ground of a bodhisattva. They are liberated from cyclic existence. They refer to it in a different way. And it's still in the path of meditation, but they refer to it in a different way in the Hinayana path, and I can't pull it out of my head. And then they'd be a bodhisattva arhat and a Hinayana arhat, okay? Or a self-realizing arhat. So there are multiple steps to this. Okay?
So how does that relate to Buddhahood? What's a Buddha then?
Buddha is one who has removed all the subtle taints of the afflictions, which are called the obstructions to knowledge. So it is the equivalent of the smell of garlic in the bag, even though there's no garlic in it. Our afflictions leave imprints that are very, very, very subtle. To become omniscient, you have to remove those. That's what bodhisattvas work on the 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds of a bodhisattva.
So that's different from from getting out of the samsara.
Right, it's bigger.
Okay.
Yep.
So you can
That's
be
why
an
they say the
arhat.
Hinayana path doesn't lead you to being a Buddha.
Okay.
So a Hinayana arhat, when a Buddha goes, hey, there's more to do, Buddhists have to do this for both Hinayana arhats and bodhisattva arhats. There's more to do. A Hinayana arhat has to go back to the beginning of the Mahayana path, have that uncontrived mind of bodhicitta, and enter the Mahayana path where they accumulate merit that's more powerful than merit without that backing of bodhicitta. Okay?
So arhats and bodhisattvas who have not cleared all the obscurations enough to be a Buddha, how do they do that if they're not in cyclic existence?
Because it's a meditation.
So
It's
they're
a
not,
perfect-
they're not thrown into another life.
No.
They just do it at some level up there.
When you're outside of samsara, both, any kind of arhat, they're liberated from samsara, okay? They don't exist like we do. They no longer have a samsaric body or a samsaric mind. They can choose to take one, but they don't have one. I mean, it's not something, they don't ever have to get up from meditative equipoise. All their activity is done by emanations.
Wow.
Yeah, we can't conceive of any of this.
Right.
Yeah.
My brain sure can.
I know, it's like-
What you explained is very helpful. It gives me more to think about. Thank you.
So this idea that a bodhisattva stays in cyclic existence in order to benefit others really comes from the Hinayana tradition, because they don't believe everybody can become a Buddha. So they say that when you get freed from cyclic existence and are enlightened, at the end of that body's life, the mind ceases to exist. So in order for a bodhisattva to continue helping sentient beings, it would have to stay in samsara. Otherwise, its mind's going to cease to exist,
But a bodhisattva can choose the body that it comes into. Is that correct?
They have more control over rebirth, but it's a different view. This is why when you read other books, other texts that are from a different perspective, like one of my favorite lineages is Ajahn Chah's Forest High lineage, but they have a different view. You have to be very aware that their view is different. So you need a lot of merit in order to remove those imprints. And the bodhisattva path accumulates much more powerful merit because of its universal motivation. It wants to benefit everyone. They don't have to like you, you can be mean to them, you can whatever. They are still going to work for everybody's enlightenment. So that kind of mind, when they're working on developing their realizations, is more powerful. Does that make sense? It seems kind of vague, but that's because we don't have that mind yet. But so when a Hinayana Arhat realizes, oh, you can in fact help others. You can't, everybody can become a Buddha, because that's what, when they're liberated, they're out of samsara, and they realize, oh, it actually is possible. So, of course they're going to want to develop bodhicitta and become completely enlightened. I mean, they don't have to really do any kind of leaps of, it's just going to, like His Holiness says in this book, it's going to naturally arise with their liberation. So, yes, Susie.
Didn't you say the Hinayana Arhat would cease to exist?
According to their view, not according to our view.
Right, so we're aiming for Mahayana, but even if we weren't aiming for Mahayana,
This is what this chapter, I don't know
there.
which chapter it is, one of the early chapters in the book talks entirely about how it doesn't matter what path you're on, you will not be liberated from samsara unless you realize this view, that things don't exist inherently. So it doesn't matter what view you're taught, you will not be liberated unless you realize the view of emptiness that the Prasangika school is putting forth. So that you can't see,
I do have a question. I don't know if Elise is finished. You may not want to answer this now, maybe something for later. Could you talk about the object of negation?
Yeah, well, that's sort of what's the subject of tonight. So, yes, Glenda.
I have a question. So where does nirvana fit into what you were just talking about?
It's the state of mind that's liberated.
So an arhat will have
That state of mind.
Okay. So
Only, of course, if they genuinely achieved liberation.
Thank you.
And according to their own tenet system, we would say they cannot achieve it that way. So we would say any teachers that are in that tradition who become enlightened or become liberated, that they hold the Prasangika view of emptiness, even though they don't teach it, because teaching it would not benefit the students that they have. This is about that disposition of mind. This is why we study all the different paths, because when you have disciples, when you got realizations and all that, You need to be able to ascertain what is the predisposition of this student and teach accordingly. That's why the Buddha taught all these paths, because they all lead to each other, you know. But according to our system, the final view of emptiness is the prasangika view that nothing exists inherently. So, the object of negation is that. It's a self that is perceived to be inherently existent. That's what we're trying to negate. So when we get to, let's see, the one disadvantage, and it's kind of a big disadvantage of electronic books, is you can't just flip the pages to the page. You have to find something and click on it to get to that page. And I have so many notes in the note thing, it's not like easy to find. There we go. All right. I promise I was on this page earlier, but then I read more, so I ended up someplace else. In a moment. I have to find the verse and then I'll tell you. I think it's verse 70, which is on page 102. And so that chapter is the continuity of the conventional self, which is in the chapter, the nature and existence of self. The beginning of that chapter is refuting others' views. But when we get to verse 70, this is Shantideva's answers to the objections put forth by these other views. So it kind of helps understand the prasangika view. Okay? Everything in all the texts that are sutra-based are going to, in this tradition, in the Tibetan tradition, Gelug tradition, are going to take the form like this, where you have somebody's position, whether it's the author's position, because sometimes Shantideva argues with himself, you know, or some other view, you know, other system of thought. Because you have to remember that at the time in these, like at Nalanda, it wasn't just one group of students that were studying one way. You know, you had a variety of schools. And so they debated each other. And even the great Indian treatises, you know, had different views. Baba Viveka, who's referred to quite often, because he was, you know, has a different view than Nagarjuna. But he also had an excellent understanding of logic. You know, so, you know, we have to, you know, so it was, you know, the debate, this idea of refuting someone else's view was very meaningful, you know. So, and the main difference of opinion is every school except the Prasangika thinks at some level the self exists inherently. You know, the other middle way school, you know, the Svatantika, really, Svatantika Madhyamaka, believe that things exist truly, conventionally, but not ultimately. Don't ask me to explain that, because it doesn't make any sense to me, but only because I've studied our view. I can't say I really get it, you know. But basically what they're saying is there has to be something from the side of the object for our consciousness to be able to apprehend it, that it's a two-way thing. So the object has something from its side, and our consciousness has something from its side and when contact is made, that's how we can establish that object. Huh? Yeah, sorry. So, if you remember way back sometime in your studies, and they discussed the definition of terms, and what was an existent object, or an object of knowledge, or the 5 other synonyms of those phrases, what was the essence of that? What proves existence, or establishes existence? Go ahead, Susie.
I'm guessing a perceiving mind?
A mind, a valid mind.
Valid.
So a mind that's hallucinating might see things, but nobody else would see them. So it'd have to be a valid conventional mind that can establish the object. And so all things that exist, we know they exist because they've been established by a valid consciousness. So everything's about how does, this consciousness, and how, if we're accurately perceiving objects. So ordinary sentient beings, in fact, all sentient beings, but in particular ordinary sentient beings, you and me, those of us who are not don't have a realization of emptiness, we're not Arya beings, everything appears to us as inherently existent. So you have an object, you see the object, the referent object is whatever, the bell, The appearing object in our thought about the object, is a truly existent bell. We've added that on. Our minds have superimposed onto the object this way of existing that's impossible. What does that? Our ignorance. It comes from our grasping at ourselves as truly existent. Grasping at ourselves in that dualistic manner of self and other. So everything that we experience is under the influence of ignorance until we have a realization of emptiness. And that realization can be inferential. So before you've had a direct realization of emptiness, you can really get a handle on emptiness. In fact, you need to in order to create the condition to have a mind powerful enough to have the result being a direct experience of emptiness. You can't just keep meditating and think one day you're going to hit upon it, just by the odds. It doesn't work that way. It's all about removing from our mind the habit of grasping. So we have to use our reasoning mind to really kind of see all the arguments, and that's what this whole book's about, is kind of looking at the arguments. So the first thing that Shantideva is up against is these schools that think that things must exist truly somehow for us to establish that they exist at all. And you'll see that a lot, where there's this phrase of something like, well, if it doesn't exist, then, what difference does it make? All these things. And that's all because to them, existence means it inherently exists. So that's to keep in mind. So if you're not used to that's the way all these texts are, it's really important to keep in mind they're all arguing, or trying to refute this notion that things, in order to function, in order to, do anything, they think in order for something to function, it has to truly exist. Some of the schools put it, go that far, others don't. So I thought we'd start with this section because it kind of deals with with karma. How does the law of karma work if there's no permanent seed that's going from life to life? Okay? So in verse 70, if you ask, the self does not exist, how can acts be linked with their results? If when the deed is done, the doer is no more, who is there to reap the karmic fruit? So the objection is that if you don't have a self, how can we maintain these two people? Because cause and effect, we say, is definite. You can only experience the effects from causes you created, you did. And if you're saying there's no self, how does that work? Now, is our view that the self doesn't exist? What doesn't exist? An inherent self. That's the object of negation. An inherently existent self. That something's coming from the side of the object that's there, that is what it is. That it's not just merely designated through language and conception, that it's not dependent on, all of the causes and conditions coming together, that there's a part of it that independently exists that way. And this is where you want to remind yourself of that self that arises when you're upset or in pain or mad, or deliriously happy, my body feels great. That self doesn't really exist. It's not that there isn't a body that feels great, but this idea that my body, this ownership of this moment of pleasure, we've imputed upon it some sort of independence that isn't there. Like often the independence is, that chocolate cake is filled with this pleasure, so I'm dependent on that cake. So we completely confuse dependency. Now, according to our view, what is the pleasure of the chocolate cake or the sex or the, great music? What does it come from? It comes from our perception. What does that mean? Go ahead, Linda.
Comes from mind.
Comes from our mind. What?
Our deluded mind.
Well, yes. Go ahead, Susie.
Attachment?
What are we attached to?
Pleasure.
And what are we
Happiness.
misperceiving?
The
root of the pleasure, the
decay.
cause of the pleasure. Because what is the cause of the pleasure? In what way?
That in the past we've done positive acts that are now ripening in a pleasant way.
Yeah. All of our pleasant experiences are our positive karma ripening. All of our negative experiences are our negative karmas ripening. Yeah, Linda.
Rainey on
Yeah.
Zoom has a question. Go ahead, Rainey. Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, hopefully I can hit the right button, and also hopefully I can remember what I wanted to say now that I'm on the spot. But one thing that came to mind for me is that these things that we're talking about, these things that they are empty of inherent existence. They dependently arise from our minds. So all these things are really just delusions.
Yep, that's the whole point of this book, is to help us, in a very methodical way, understand what that object of negation is, this inherently existent self, so that we don't over-negate and end up in nihilism or under-negate and end up with eternalism or absolutism or whatever. There's no real good translation of that. Yes, Susie.
There's something that's bothering me. If some schools think that there is some underlying existence of something, don't they believe in dependent arising?
Yeah, but they still think there's something in all Buddhist schools accept dependent arising, all Buddhist schools accept selflessness. They just define these things differently. So it's independence on whatever's coming from the side of the object, as well as the mind's, establishing it, the mind perceiving the object. So, it's both. But we don't need to worry about how they get it wrong. We want to worry about, we want to be able to spot these things are not idiots who had these views, okay? We need to understand that the more we meditate on this subject, the more we'll start to say, oh, I do that. I do think there's something from the side of the object. I don't think it's entirely me that's superimposing this on something. And you'll see it in these moments of strong emotion. You'll realize, oh, look what I'm doing. I've created a story about this object as if the object is playing a part. We want to be able to recognize that. When we have doubt about karma, part of it may be, but I don't get how something I did eons ago, and it's not even, something my eye. It was someone else's eye. Why would I reap we really want to notice the ways in which we try to find a way out from it being our responsibility, So, and we can get caught up in thinking they're just idiots, these other people, and not work on, am I really understanding what the object of negation is?
Well, I knew they weren't idiots. What I was trying to find out is, was I wrong that they believed in dependent origination?
They believe in dependent origination. So yeah, if you go back and look at your tenets, you'll see that all Buddhist schools believe in things being a dependent arising. Again, how they define that's going to be different depending on their view. So if there's no moment of self that you could point to and say, that's me, how does the karmic seed go from life to life? Susie's looking around.
On the very, very subtle mind stream.
So it's on that continuum of mind. It's not a physical, after all. Sometimes they say there's a form to it, but it's a really subtle thing, okay? So we can say my continuum, as long as we understand that my continuum isn't something permanent, that it's not findable. My continuum is a series of moments, and I'm not in control of my continuum. They're dependent arisings, right? So this body is going to end, and that's part of the my, My mind's not going to end, but will I even remember my mind next time of this life? Unless I've, advance in my later years a lot further, probably not. Hard to say. Not really. So it's one of the things, the first verse in 71, Shantideva points out that the basis of the act and the fruit are not the same. That's true with every cause and effect relationship, that cause and effect don't exist simultaneously. Cause precedes effect. So it's never the same thing that's reaping the result. We know this from the impermanence of the person, the body. So literally, Say you insult someone and they slap you, the person who insults the other person and the person who gets slapped are not the same person. It's the same continuum. We can't see that they're not the same, that it's changed, that it's disintegrated and arisen. We can't see anything like that. But so that's how cause and effect works. So the sprout that comes from that seed, they don't exist at the same time. Now, we don't have the ability to see exactly when that seed becomes a sprout instead of a seed, and we can argue semantics. But each stage of it, the cause ceases when the effect arises, in very basic terms. So the fact that they don't exist at the same time doesn't matter in any example of cause and effect. So say little seed sprouts, and then it dies. Did it never sprout? It's not rocket science, promise. Yeah, I said the seed sprouted. So yeah, it sprouted. What didn't happen? Yeah, the condition to keep it alive. Maybe it didn't get any water. Maybe there weren't nutrients in the soil. Maybe the sun came out at just the wrong moment. Yeah.
Could it be that somebody did purification practice?
Let's complicate this further.
Sorry, I've been thinking about purification practice since Sunday's teaching, so it's on my mind.
So, okay. So, yes, somebody could have done purification practice. It probably didn't have anything to do with the sprout and its seed, okay? Because even though you may have the cause to plant a sprout, a seed, and then it sprouts or something, it is also dependent upon the conditions of the weather and all that kind of stuff. So, your karma is not solely responsible for the fruition of that seed, because it's not your mind. The mind is something else. So the mind, go ahead, bring out your doubt, argue. Go ahead. Now you look like, but wait a minute. Yeah. Okay, now we refer to karmic seeds placed on our mind stream through our actions, right? They're not seeds. It's just what you call it? Metaphor, analogy, So, okay. We also say they can be burnt. How are they burnt? Through purification. We can have such a strong mind when we purify a negative seed on our mind stream that it effectively renders that seed unable to produce a result in the future. So no matter what conditions it meets, it can't bear fruit. Okay? We can also, if our mind's not quite that strong, we can weaken it so that it can only produce a lesser effect. Okay? So this section of the book is talking about the fact that something's impermanent, the fact that things don't exist truly, doesn't impact the karmic cause and effect. Partly because if things truly existed, what do we say about cause and effect? Oh, my God. You have an answer?
Repeat.
Oh, what did I say? I said, if things truly existed, what would that happen? What would that say to cause and effect? What would that do to cause and effect?
Literate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can't happen.
Yeah.
It wouldn't change.
The whole argument that Prasangika has is that things could not produce anything if they were inherently existent. We would be born fully formed as what we are in this moment, and there'd be lots of us. You know? So that's part of this idea of independent existence, is this idea that there'd be no work to be done. You'd just be there. But nothing could put you there because there'd be no thing that could produce it. Because production means change. Something has to change for something to be produced. So this, you know, I'm only bringing this up, not because I don't think you all get that. You have to remember it. It's not enough to kind of understand that. You know, oh yeah, that's right, it has to be produced. It has meaning. You know, that is relevant to these debates. Yep.
I think this is related. You said cause ceases when effect arises. Is that true? Is that what you said?
I couldn't really hear her. She was kind of going,
Yeah, cause ceases when effect arises.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
If you're in a fist fight and you punch someone, that's the cause for negative karma. Now your next punch, is that another cause?
Yeah.
So it could be really broken down. I don't
It's
know.
every moment.
Moment. Lots of it.
We've just placed 65 more
Okay.
seeds on our mental continuum
Okay. It's
because every thought places one. Now, a lot of them are neutral. Okay? So this is why when we talk about it's so important to pause before responding to any event, it's because you're just creating more karma. So if you get insulted, so you turn around and insult back, and then they insult you back, and you'll meet them again and again, unless you can have that strong mind to purify all those seeds and, you know, make them burnt. Okay? So, the next section asks, is the mind the self? So some schools designate the mind as the self. So we say that nothing that is the basis of designation can be that thing, because it's the basis of designation for that thing. So our body and mind are not the self. What are they? You can literally repeat back what I just said. They are the basis of designation for the self. That's all the body and mind is. The self is a mere label. The I is a mere label on that basis of designation of body and mind. So 73, verse 73 says, the thoughts now past and those to come are not the self, they are no more or are not yet. Is then the self the thought which now is born? If so, it sinks to nothing when the latter fades. This is getting at one of our habits, and I know it's my habit, of thinking that it's everything of the mind, body and mind. It's the collection of body and mind. The self is all of that, Well, I still wouldn't be able to point to anything that I could say, oh, that's me. And that's what I'm implying by this idea that the collection is me. What is the difficulty with that? And that's what this verse is talking about. It's always changing. So at what moment is it you? Do you have 3 billion, do you have 65 cells in these 65 thoughts, Now this seems too simple to be helpful. But it's exactly the point. Because, when we talked about, I think on a Sunday, we talked about how we take one moment and we blow it up to be this end-all, be-all moment. That's what we're doing. We're going, this is the moment that proves you're a jerk. And we grasp at that moment, thinking, oh no, it's who you've always been and I just hadn't noticed before. We want to see when we're doing that. We want to realize we are reifying moments when we grasp after them as if they identify a person. That makes sense? That's why you want, so when you read this stuff, you really want to look at your own mind and your own habits and try to spot when you do this. Because the words just, when you understand what it's trying to say at all, it's a fairly simple concept, this idea that things don't inherently exist, and yet everything appears to us if it does. And we act from that spot very, often, not, Now, so much so that we have to literally sit there and think about, or in our pause, think about, okay, this is just one moment, to talk us out of it, which is a good habit to develop. But that's how ingrained it is. So we really do have to overcome this habit. It's not just that we can go, I get that, and we'll have realized emptiness. So this idea that things don't exist the way they appear to us to exist does not negate the conventional world, okay? So verse 74, page 105. I love this fact because I was in Australia when I first heard this verse, I think, and there are a lot of banana trees in Australia. So for instance, we may take banana trees, cutting through the fibers and find nothing. Likewise, analytical investigation will find no I, no underlying self. I didn't know this until I was in Australia, that banana trees had no core, that if you cut them down, there's nothing there. So, yeah, it's just like a whole bunch of leaves. Oh, yeah. So it's just this thing, this great big thing that you think, surely there's somewhere in there's the tree. But no, it's not like that. It doesn't exist that way. I think they only bear fruit once because of that. I could be wrong about that. I am not a horticulturist. Don't take my word on anything that has to do with something that grows. So this self, the sense of I that we have, that we think, oh, is so useless some days, and so this or that we have a lot of self-loathing for, or a lot of pride in, whatever direction your mind tends to go. It's like the banana tree. It's literally an imputed self that doesn't exist at all. I can't tell if there's a question.
I always have a question. I was just thinking, if you're having an argument with someone and you're thinking they're a jerk, you have to perhaps have analyzed that in some way, and I'm losing it. It's very slippery. Are they a jerk now? Are they a jerk then? Are they still a jerk? You know, it's like, how do you protect yourself?
Because you can make the distinction between an action and a person, between an identity of a person and an action.
And you may expect that action again from them
if you're not stupid.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. We can trust patterns in the sense that we have no guarantee that will ever happen again, because people work on themselves. People also have extremely bad days we know nothing about, you know, so we can't say that is who they are. We can say that action wasn't nice, or it was abusive, or it was whatever it was to you, you know? Now, you have to, that's through your filters, so you may be, you know, exaggerating. But the point is, when we decide that's who we are, they are, anybody is, we are over-reifying the person. We're taking one moment and making it the whole continuum. Make sense? Okay. So when we do these meditations where we go through the body, because I think Geshe-la leads those a lot, right? You know, it's not the arm, it's not this, it's not even the cells of the body, it's not this. That's to really help us think about impermanence, and also the fact that you can't ever find something to point to that says, this is me. And yet we act as if there is something you could point to that says, this is me. And we grasp that self. And it may not be the body. I mean, if we're in a lot of pain, we might be grabbing the body, grasping at the body is that way. No, I'm this person whose body, you know, we might think whose body is falling apart, but we're actually holding ourselves a little tighter than that, you know? Yeah.
I have a question about that particular meditation. Mainly because I have a lot of trouble with that meditation, because my ignorance tells me it's self-evident that I'm not my hair, that I'm not my teeth, etc. And yet it's, you know, it's a recommended meditation. So why?
Well, all right, let's get to that section. That's coming up. There's a whole chapter. The nature of phenomena, chapter 9, the whole in its parts. Contemplating the body. Okay, so His Holiness says that generally speaking, meditating on the mindfulness of the body is from the Hinayana scriptures. So we tend to, in this tradition, we extended the 4 close placements where we don't just do the body, we also do feelings, mind, and then phenomena, all 4. So, and that's partly because of what the first 2 schools, what do we call them? That one, and Sutriyana. What, somebody said it.
Hemant, say it again.
Hi, Hemant.
It's Vaibhashika and Swatantrika.
I can't do it. I'm sorry. My mouth just doesn't do it.
It's Vaibhavika. Vaibhavika. It's Swatantrika.
I know. I mean, I can spell it for you. It's just not working. So anyway, okay. So it's empty. It also means like particularist or great exposition. So, okay, so I'm just, trying to, there are other words for it. Anyway, so the first two schools, they don't hold everything as having a selflessness, for one thing, So what's useful to them to look at in terms of meditations on the selflessness of things are different from the other schools. So there's a reason for the choices of what's advised by the Buddha to what you meditate on, okay? So in our school, one of the key things that we need to meditate on is the mind, the emptiness of the mind, because that's critical to our superimposition of true existence on the appearance of everything, And then also the selflessness of phenomena, because not all schools think there is a selflessness of phenomena. So, okay. So then we go through the standard verses on thinking about the body. There's some earlier, and then and it continues. And this is illustrating how even the label body, you can't find the body in the body, because all you end up is the parts of the body. And then when you look at those parts, you end up with smaller parts. And it's refuting this idea of something that's unitary, independent, self-sufficient. I love this. Verse 83, I just love. It's on page 111. Thus, when there is no body in the limbs, but from illusion does the idea spring and is affixed to a specific shape, just as when a scarecrow is mistaken for a man. And that's kind of what we're doing. It's not like, that's like the coiled rope and the snake metaphor. But because the man does exist, it's not a scarecrow, but we superimpose on it something that's an exaggerated idea of what a man is, what a person is. Because we see it as this independent, self-sufficient, that it's able, it just kind of comes from its own side, which doesn't exist. So it goes through the fingers, then gets down to the atoms. Remember that these are atoms from the point of view of the Buddha or Shantideva. It's not atoms from the point of view of modern science. So don't let that trip you up. This book I have that's called Transcendent Wisdom, that Alan Wallace translates, all its footnotes are all about, well, physicists might think that blah, so if you don't and that's from 1988, so it's not even valid today. So anyway, it's really kind of hard to understand the notes if you're not one of those scientist people. So, but it's kind of fun to read. This very small part, And I think it's kind of similar to our idea of not what quantum physics says an atom is, what our mechanical, what's it called? What's that? Quantum mechanics would say is an atom, but it's still like the electron circling around the nucleus or something. Sort of like what we learned in kindergarten or something. I don't know. But so apparently it is useful, but it's not what they hold to be true. He concludes with this. His Holiness says, there is nothing absolute about the objects of our anger and attachment. Nothing is desirable or perfect in the absolute sense. Neither is anything undesirable and repulsive in the absolute sense. Therefore, in reality, there is no ground for extreme emotional reactions to things and events. So this is one of those areas where we might notice there's a part of us that doesn't want to let go. You know, that kind of values our attachments. You know, so it's, and this is where we can get into this mindset that says, well, maybe liberation's not worth it. You know, if there's no passion in my life, if there's no, you know, those moments where isn't it boring if there's, nothing happening that's creating this roller coaster, So we just need to be, this is the kind of thing we want to notice. Oh, I'm grasping at this because it's bringing me pleasure now, or in this life. It also brings you all the suffering that goes with it. So we're not actually having to give up the feeling of bliss. We're having to give up the thinking it's coming from the side of the object. It says in the FPMT's little email today, where Lamayeshi was talking about something, I'm so helpful, that when there are things to enjoy them, Don't feed your attachment, however. Don't feed the grasping. We need to understand that what we're enjoying is the result of our positive actions. So what we want to rejoice in is that we created the cause for something pleasant, and you try to imagine what that could be. Maybe you cooked for friends. Maybe you whatever. I mean, we don't know what it is because we're not Buddhas yet, but we want to remember that it's our actions, our positive actions, that create these results, not the object of the pleasure or even the suffering, for that matter. It's really our past actions. So we don't want to over-negate and think things don't exist at all. That conventional reality doesn't exist. Things do exist, they just don't exist in the way we hold them to exist. The other thing, this is where dependent arising comes in. That things are empty of inherent existence because they're dependent arisings. That's one of the reasons that supports it. Anything that depends on other factors is devoid of its own independent nature, and this absence of an independent nature is emptiness. Even emptiness is dependent. Emptiness is empty. When the recognition dawns, this is on page 116, when the recognition dawns that although things appear to be solid and autonomous, they do not exist in that way. This indicates that you are really arriving at an experiential understanding of emptiness. This is known as perceiving things as illusion-like. When your understanding of emptiness deepens and becomes a full experience of emptiness, you will be able to not only confirm the emptiness of phenomena by merely reflecting on dependent origination, but your ascertainment of emptiness will reinforce your conviction in the validity of cause and effect. You might think that when your understanding deepens in this way, you have reached such a high level of realization that you are on the threshold of becoming fully enlightened. What you've done is you're on the path of accumulation. That's the first path. Just to humble us all. Our understanding at this point of emptiness is still inferential, based, it's based on reasoning. This is when you must develop calm abiding so that you can place single pointedness. You need to, so you can alternate your single pointed mind on emptiness with an analysis of emptiness so that special insight can arise. So once you develop calm abiding, you enter the path of preparation. And so when you're doing this, when you're able to focus single-pointedly on emptiness, this is going to cause dualistic appearance to become less and less. And that will lead you to a direct realization of emptiness, which is when you enter the path of seeing and become an Arya being. And this is called a true path. So there are a lot of steps between now and then, but it's doable. It's just a matter of lots of reflection, developing single-pointedness. Yes?
I'm still confused about Donna's question.
I'll have to repeat Donna's question. I have not grasped upon it.
Can you do it, Donna? I think I can, but she could do it better.
My question kind of goes to I feel frustrated with that meditation that's, I'm not my hair, I'm not my eyes, because it seems self-evident to me, so I kind of think, why am I going through this? And it is recommended, and Geshe talks about it frequently, so I'm thinking there's got to be a benefit to doing this, but...
Well, I think it's helpful if you progress to all the 4 close placements of mindfulness to help you really understand why thinking about the body. And also, it's one of those that you kind of check out your mind while you're walking around. So when you look in the mirror, when you look in, to see when you're grasping at your body as the self, because we do. Now, when we think about it, we go, well, of course, that's not the self. But we still do it, Oh, I'm just an old lady. I don't know, Yeah, Mark.
So when we do that, when we grasp at ourself as a self, even though we may have realization.
You're not having a realization when you grasp at a self.
Right, but what I'm saying
you may have understanding.
we may be realized to know that we're grasping.
I wouldn't use the word realization.
Okay.
I know that's a word we use in English all the time. Oh, when we realize we're thinking this or thinking that. It just has a very special meaning in Buddhism.
Right.
So it's more when you're aware that you're grasping at the self.
Right. So when I'm aware I'm grasping at the self, so when you're doing the meditation as being suggested, you can know
when you bring
that
it to
you're
mind.
that you're not any of these, but perhaps the teaching isn't designed specifically for you.
Well, but even so, if you know you're grasping at the self, you want to kind of be aware of how you're grasping at the self. Because sometimes we're grasping at the self thinking that we are, this angry person, or we're thinking of ourselves, we're right. This person's, wrong. We want, so we want to be able to identify what we're grasping at. So if we're grasping at the idea that this idea that I have is right, we're grasping at that idea as being inherently existent, and it's the correct idea,
Yeah, so the idea itself wouldn't be correct or incorrect.
Well, it's just it's more layered than that. Because what are we doing when we're grasping at an idea?
We're attaching, trying to attach.
We're attached to our view, aren't we? And so the self kind of comes in there, doesn't it?
Right.
It's not like we're thinking, that this view is so perfect, we might be thinking this view is so perfect that how can anybody not believe it, but there's also a certain notion about ourselves that because we do hold that view, we hold the right view. So we have lots of layers of attachment there. So we really want to notice when we're exaggerating something negatively or positively, where we're holding something as, like it's right from its own side. Or I'm old. What does it really mean when I say I'm old? You don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Hi, Margaret.
Hi, Venerable. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Hi, Esther. These are my Florida students. So, relative to you, if I say I'm old, then it depends on what I mean by old.
Right.
You wouldn't have any image at all, right?
Well, then it depends on what I think. So it's just a view. I mean, it's just an idea.
It's just a view. Yeah, that's ideal. But that's not what we think, do we? We look in the mirror and go, ugh, bad hair day. I never say that. But I do go sometimes, oh, I need to shave my head today. So
If I'm talking to someone younger, then I mean something, I'm old.
it is
I have
relative.
wisdom.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, it means wisdom. Yes.
It can mean anything.
Or we think, I don't look too bad for an old person. Whatever. We need to spot these things, though, where we're thinking that we are that. Now, some of us, there's some things we don't have any issues with, I don't have many the things that I don't have any issues with, but, we want to spot our repetitive tendency to hold ourselves as some sort of fixed entity. And we think of in terms of that, we'll think of ourselves as teenagers, and we have a very kind of specific idea of what we were like as teenagers. And then we have that idea as like when we were in our 20s or whatever, however you count time. I count time in relationships, I had lots of failed relationships. Oh, that was during that time, but other people do it in decades, other people do it by the ages of their kids, whatever, but we want to see that all of it is superimposing an independent, autonomous kind of thing that doesn't exist. Because you'd never be able to point to a moment in even your history, and say, oh, that was me as a teenager. Even though we do that, don't we? Oh boy, that sums me up. It's not a big deal in language in the sense of, this is how we talk, but we want to see if we're feeding our superimposition of inherent existence, if we're feeding that habit. And you might think you just do, you might do it more with others, your perception of others, but usually that has its, echo back. So this chapter on the nature of phenomena goes through all these steps of the path. So it's an interesting read, and explains, like at the 8th level, a bodhisattva is liberated, but they don't really talk about that in terms of bodhisattvas because they're aiming for Buddhahood. But they're considered on the pure grounds, the bodhisattva grounds, bodhisattva levels, bodhisattva bhumis. But they still have those obscurations too, omniscience, cognitive obscurations. At the very last instance of the 10th bodhisattva level, we generate an extremely powerful wisdom of emptiness that acts as an antidote to remove even the habitual patterns, predispositions, and imprints formed by all our past afflictions and deluded states of mind. And this then culminates in the attainment of full omniscience or Buddhahood. This is followed by a section called the crucial sense of commitment and courage, which I think is great. And it does tell you how many, like in the first eon, how there are 3 countless eons or something, and it describes where you are with those. So. But the mindfulness of emptiness of feelings. So that begins with verse 88. And it goes through a lot of things we already think about. We think about the fact that, we know that feelings aren't inherently what we think they are, because when something, the wonderful chocolate cake, if we're really upset about something else, we won't even notice the taste if we eat it. So the chocolate cake is not inherently delicious. It depends, on our mind. And that's true of the same with suffering. When you're infatuated, very little out there in the world hurts. You can just, no problem. When my mother was dying, I remember how aware I was, how unimportant everything was. This is like, why did I was trying to get it was my final year of college, and I was trying to get that done. I had to write 8 term papers because I missed a lot of school. So, they were 8 bad term papers. But anyway, I wasn't worried at all. It was just like, no big deal, So that, it just shows you that things that we get all caught up in, if something else is happening, not so much, That's the relative nature of these things that we can, when they're happening in that moment, can think, but we may think like, the big thing, my mother dying, is a very big deal. And we may superimpose on that. Now, it is one of the kinds of suffering that is particularly horrific that we go through in samsara, is the loss of people we love. That's definitely a loss. But it's not a loss in terms that continuum of mind has ceased to exist. It's moved on to some other form of, body, whatever. But it's a loss to us. That person's not available to us. And so, and that's part of the suffering of samsara. But we make our loss into something, we can actually have thoughts like, that I'll never be happy again, these kind of things. And if we hold that, we won't ever be happy again. You know, that's a problem, you know. But that's why it's so important to notice that how impermanent everything is. You know, that everything changes in its quality and its tone, and its, you know, our experience of it changes. You know, and holding on to anything as if it's permanent doesn't serve us well. No. So these verses are going through that kind of thing. And it's saying that if suffering or pleasure is inherently existent, it wouldn't be able to change in that way. It wouldn't matter what mood we were in when we ate the chocolate cake. It would always be delicious because it's inherently delicious. It couldn't miss. You know. So I'd read this section for next week because it's the feeling. So I was talking about how feelings in the nature of sensation. So we want to talk about that. It's page 120. So what chapter is it in? It's still in the nature of phenomena. But also, I mean, it's important to just, like I said, you know, this mindfulness doesn't have to happen on a meditation cushion. You know, it helps on the meditation cushion because it gets in your mind what you know, how to reflect on it. But then, when you catch yourself either being upset about something or, you know, whatever, boredom, you know, whatever, or you're thinking of yourself in a certain physical light, you know, one way or the other, you know, you want to kind of look, okay, I'm not my body. So like if we're sick, you know, it's helpful to think about the fact, okay, this is not me. You know, it can put a little distance between ourselves and the pain. Or if we think, oh my God, I'm never going to be that youthful, you know, I don't think I was ever that youthful, nubile person anyway, but, you know, that was a theory. And I'm sure, you know, that we miss that part entirely because we're so worried about being unattractive that, you know, the most attractive we are in our whole lives, we just miss that whole experience. It's such a shame. So, it could have been much more fun. But this is, you know, but we want to see, you know, we want to just notice these things so that we can counter the mind that's grasping and kind of chuckle about ourselves, you know, so that when we look in the mirror and we go, ugh, you know, and think it's a big deal, we can go, yeah, it's not a big deal, you know, move on really quickly. So, all right. But each of these, His Holiness doesn't just do commentary on the verses, he does sections, you know, he goes through some stuff before he gets into the commentary in the next part of the book or whatever, so enjoy those. They're really a good overview of everything. Any questions at home? I think there's a part of us, because we haven't realized emptiness, that think it should be something, I don't know, more exotic when we're looking at, you know, how to dismantle this false appearance that things have, you know, that it's, you know, that it, because it's really, the descriptions of it are not difficult. It's just that we still grasp, you know? So we want to keep working at it so that we'll discover there's nothing to grasp at, you know? That it is, yeah, I'm not any of these parts. So, but then that first time, you know, like your head hurts and you go, oh, my head hurts. We want to go, It's temporary, it's, da, 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 da. It's the result of some negative action. May I not do that negative action again? May I use this as a jumping off point to purify whatever negative action this is the result of, that we don't hold it to be me, unchangeable, and it is the nature of samsara. We suffer in samsara, that's the nature of it. So, it's not a big deal. So when we try to make it a big deal, we're grasping at something. Anyway, I also don't like the meditation on the parts of the body. It's like, yeah, I get that, But it's intriguing to get down to the electron level, and to really think about, like how it's mostly space, and it's mostly not us, that our body's mostly other beings. Like, it's outrageous. It's like, what is it? Like, there are 300 trillion microbes, or something, and there's only, there's less cells in the human body than there are microorganisms in the human body. That's wild, It's really wild. And this my body, no, I'm afraid not. You're really just the feeding ground for all these other things, So there's, So you thought people were exploiting you before. Ha! They're not even paying rent, really. And they're not taking care of some extra parts I'd love for them to, eat. Get rid of this. So anyway, okay, let's, whatever we do next, dedicate. So be happy that you're studying, that you have the opportunity to read such a text and that you're, trying to understand it. And it's hard when, we try to pull all these different pieces together, karma and, conventional existence and all this stuff. And so we can get lost, but, that's just the process, So anyway, but rejoice that you're doing it. And thank Geshe for suggesting it. So, next.
So in the Gold Prayer Book, we'll go to pages 235 and 236. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I might follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with a dedication praised as the best by the victorious ones thus gone of the 3 times, so I might perform good works. I dedicate whatever virtues I have ever collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of perfect, pure Losang Dragpa to shine forever. And now on page 244, the Long Life Prayer for His Holiness. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And Khyentse Rinpoche, the one who mastered speech at a very young age, the one with great patience who received the name Avatare, the one with great precision who spread the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa on bliss and void, Lama, ornament of the yellow hat tradition, please remain until samsara ends. And now on the inside back cover, the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you are the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And now on the inside of the back cover, the long live prayers for Geshe Geluk and Geshe Sangpo. Supreme Guide, you lead us on the many paths of virtue. A shining sun, you give us the best of excellent explanations. Supreme virtuous friend, you are a constant Dharma companion. Lama who has renounced fame, may you ever remain. You who have steadfast imprints of virtuous qualities and keep the instructions of the glorious Guru in your heart. You who pass day and night with noble activities, great virtuous friend, may you have a very long life. And now 7 Tara mantras for the benefit of all sentient beings. Om Tari Tu Re Soha. 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 Om Tari Tu Re Soha.
Thanks, everyone.
I just encourage you to really, when you read the verses, make sure you understand them and bring your questions back if if something's confusing. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, because His Holiness does a great job of explaining it. So, anyway, thank y'all. Good to see you.
Thank you, Venerable Tendron.
Thank you, Margaret. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.